Hey everyone, I'm going to give you all a brief rundown on how to write a lab report. A lot of this will be a review if you took Bio 121 in the fall, but just in case you didn't, I want to just lay out the basic guidelines for writing a report. So let's start with the very first thing, which is going to be your title. It's a thing that's easy to overlook, but it's actually important that you have a good descriptive title to your lab report. A good title is often going to include the variables that are being tested and also the organism that you're studying. So throughout this presentation, I have picked a few things out of a paper that I wrote a few years ago as examples. Basically, when you're writing a lab report, you are writing a mini version of a paper that could potentially be published in a scientific journal. So here, my paper title was Multiple Sensory Modalities Used by Squid in Successful Predatory Evasion Throughout Ontogeny. So there's a few really important pieces of information here. First is that I'm testing sensory modalities. So I was looking at vision and mechanoreception, testing squid, testing what they do in the face of a predator, and I'm also testing throughout ontogeny, which are different life stages. You also see my name is below, as well as my other authors. You're going to put your name, and you're also going to include your lab mates' names as well. For the introduction, you are setting up the framework for the rest of your paper here. So you are going to include background information about this topic. You are definitely going to include peer-reviewed literature in this section. So what have other people written about this question that you are asking? There's probably a framework in place for you to be able to actually run the experiments that you are running. You're also going to want to be really clear about the objectives of your study. Below I highlighted a few of the objectives of my study. And you're also going to want to be clear about what your hypotheses were. So typically an introduction is going to range between 3 to 4 paragraphs, with that last paragraph outlining your objectives and your hypotheses. Now for your materials and methods, one thing we definitely do not want you to do is to just list out the stuff that you used and bullet point the things you did. This is a written section, so you are going to write this in paragraph format, just like the introduction. Typically this can be 1 to 2 paragraphs long, depending on how complicated your methods were. It's most important that it's just in a paragraph form fashion, and also that you include a reference to the lab manual. Now your results section is what's going to come next, and this is the place where you are going to report what you found. And you can report both quantitative data, which are going to be statistical analyses that you ran, or you can do qualitative data as well, where you describe what happened. Both of these are important forms of data. But all you're going to do here is state what you found. You are not going to explain why you found anything in this particular section. We save that for our discussion section. Typically, your results are going to be 1 to 3 paragraphs long. Here again, it's important to write this out in a paragraph form. You can't just put graphs and have that be your entire results section. You need to actually write out paragraphs as well. But you are going to include figures, and we do expect a specific format when you are looking at your graphs. So it's incredibly important that you label your axes. Both your y and your x axes need to be appropriately labeled. Notice that on this figure there is no graph title. You don't put the title actually on the figure. Excel will automatically try to put one there, and you can just delete that. Instead, you're going to be putting your graph title down below in the figure description. So here you're going to number your figures. So you can refer to them back in the text as figure 1, figure 2, figure 3. And you're also going to include a description of this figure underneath the graph itself. Now for your discussion, this is actually like the most important part of the paper in many ways, because this is where you get to really explain what happened in your experiment. So you're going to talk about whether your hypotheses were supported, yes or no, and why you think that was. What do other papers say about this topic? Um, and put this information in light of what we already know about your topic. If you think there were sources of errors, you can include those, but do be careful to not just say that if your hypothesis wasn't supported, it was because of certain errors. Sometimes we get unexpected results, and that's science, and that's okay. And sometimes you need to think harder than you originally thought you would about why you ended up getting the results that you did. So you'll want to keep the big picture in mind here as well. So why did you even run this experiment? What does it matter? What do your results mean? And usually when you do science, you end up asking a whole lot more questions than you actually were able to answer. So what kind of future studies would you do if you got to do a part 2 to this experiment? What would that look like? So typically your discussion is going to be around 3 to 4 paragraphs long. Again, you are definitely going to have peer-reviewed literature here as well. So because you're using peer-reviewed literature both in the introduction and in the discussion, and probably a reference to the lab manual as well, you're going to want to make sure that you are using a proper format. This can look a little different depending on who you're writing a lab report for. Different journals have slightly different formats, but overall, you just want to be consistent with what you are using. So this is an example from Journal of Experimental Biology in their format. If Dr. Fanning and Dr. Moore give you a specific format to use, we'll go with that one. To be honest, I don't care so much what you use as long as you use what you use well, so just be consistent with it. You're typically going to want to use at least 5 references per a lab report. If the different number again comes down from Dr. Fanning and Dr. Moore, we'll roll with that as a group. And do make sure that in your references, you're only using peer-reviewed literature. Again, think back to 121 where you did that activity in the library and you looked at peer-reviewed versus non-peer-reviewed sources. So websites are not appropriate here. Newspaper articles are not appropriate. Journal articles are not appropriate. It has to be from a peer-reviewed scientific journal. And if you are not sure what that looks like, get in touch with me and we will go a little bit further with that. So on Tuesday morning at 9:30, we are going to meet and we're going to discuss this a little bit further. So come with your questions and we will continue to talk about what makes a really good lab report. Until then, stay well. I'll see you soon.